The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. On today's show, we're going to review two matches this week. One of them pretty good, and the other one pretty bad. And then we're going to preview the game against Portland coming up this Thursday on July 1st. We'll also talk about player injuries, some transfer rumors, and a few other pieces of Austin FC news. I'm Landon Cottom, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. Landon, we have another live show.
We do.
On Wednesday, I've learned that time exists in a weird space in the podcast world. So on Wednesday, June 30th, at 6 p.m., we're going to be at Fourth Tap. Again, Adrian Healy will be joining us, which still blows my mind that we can send Adrian Healy an email and he says yes to things. I don't get it, but
yeah,
I appreciate it.
It's very cool. I turned on, I don't remember what game it was. Maybe it was LAFC Sporting Kansas City or some MLS game the other day. And it was like, oh, it's my friend Adrian Healy doing the broadcast there.
So I heard this rumor that Adrian's going to cover the first Columbus game at their new stadium, which is a bit.
Is he really?
Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
that's what I just read that in Slack, and if it happened in Slack, it must be true. But I thought that was a little interesting twist to that whole saga. But yeah, y'all come out and join us at 6 p.m. on Wednesday the 30th with Adrian. Pam Cato, who we've interviewed before from Craft Beer Austin, will be hosting it. And you can listen to us talk and enjoy craft beer and have a good time.
And one thing I want to stress is we're calling this a live show, but we are very likely not going to be recording it. And so you will not be able to watch it from a stream and will not be able to listen to it later. And so if you want to see it or hear it, you'll have to come hang out with us and not listen to it later.
Yeah, that is very true. And one other thing, the one we did at the W was very 101. And I imagine that the Fourth Tap brewery area crowd may ask a bit more sophisticated questions. So if you're into all this, come on down and ask us the hardest question you have and we'll punt it to Adrian.
Yeah, if nothing else, just heckle us or ask us intentionally hard questions to watch us sweat.
Yeah, if you're true friends, that's what you'll do.
Okay, Jeremiah, I don't really want to do this, but should we talk about the midweek game against Minnesota?
We should talk about the most depressing experience that I've had as an Austin FC fan so far, I think, in terms of games. Yeah,
so ended up losing 2-0 on last Wednesday to Minnesota. There were some last-minute lineup changes, so Alex Ring, last minute, it seems like they announced the starting lineup. Alex Ring was in it, and then 5 or 10 minutes before the game starts, I saw the Austin FC Twitter account post an update saying never mind, Ring's not playing, and Lil Sebastian is starting today. Matt Besler is also out. We found out later it was a foot injury that he sustained in the previous game that just not gotten better. So the starting lineup ended up being Stuver in goal, and we had Lima, Romagna, Cascante, and then Aiden Stanley at left back, which I think that one was planned just to rest Kolmanich because I don't think he's come out of a game since Ben Sweat's injury. Then Fagundes, Berhalter, Pochettino in midfield. Then Redes, Cecilio, and Manny Perez. And Manny Perez was actually playing at the striker position to start off with. I think him and Cecilio ended up kind of switching around some later on, but Perez, who is not a striker, was starting at the number 9 in that game. So to start off with, I think we had maybe a few early bright moments, but not a lot went on for us early on. And then 9th minute, Nick Lima goes down, not touched, grabbing the back of his leg. Pretty easy to assume it was a hamstring injury. That was confirmed later on. And then it just went downhill from there. And I think 1 minute later, Franco Fragapane scores a goal inside the box. Nothing that Stuver could do. I think maybe the defense was maybe a little sluggish, could have put more pressure on him, but it ended up being a really good finish. In the 18th minute, Adrian Hunu scored a header. That was off of a corner, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yeah.
Either a corner or a set piece. I think it was a corner, though. But second goal there, in before those goals and after those goals, Minnesota was in complete control of this game. Austin never looked like they had a prayer, and they looked tired and sluggish, and the positioning was bad, and it was just not a fun game to watch. They played very poorly.
Yeah, and I want to give you a little credit though, because I think in the preview show you talked about Fragapane being a difference maker, and he definitely was for sure. He looked like the best player on the field against us last week.
Yeah, for sure. Him and Hunu have come in and made immediate impact on that team. So I know a lot of people had really high hopes for Minnesota early on in the season. And then after the first few games, they maybe had not so high hopes, but maybe those hopes are getting higher now that they have a competent attacking set.
Which hopefully gives us, I was going to say, it gives us hope, which we'll talk about this later.
Yeah,
maybe,
of course.
Maybe adding competent attack will make a difference for a certain team in our home city.
Yeah. Some other notable moments in the 29th minute, Michael Boxall, who I didn't know this about him until that first game that we played them, and then watching this one confirmed it, but he's I don't know how to say this without cursing, but he's like, anytime there's like some little extras going on, Boxall seems to be involved. And so I think there was a ball in the air, and Boxall ends up putting Cecilio in a headlock and pulling him down to the ground. And then seems like for no reason, just like karate chop chokes Cecilio for a second. Upon replay, I think Cecilio's hand might have been in between Boxall's legs. And I couldn't see his hand, didn't know what he was doing, but it was probably not anything nice. But I think that's why Boxall karate chopped him. Do you think that should have been? I think it should have at least been a yellow.
Oh, I think it should have been a red. Yeah, I mean, it was retaliation because I don't, like the ref didn't see what was going on the bottom of the pile there, but it was pretty aggressive. It was blatant too. I mean, it was right in the middle of the pitch. It wasn't like there would be people, it was in the corner and people couldn't see it or whatever.
Yeah, my only guess is either the ref didn't really see it and didn't want to make a call based on something he didn't really see, or he also saw what Cecilio did, or they told him what Cecilio did, and they're like, okay, we're just going to call this one even.
So I would like to talk about that tactic because I think in one of the Cecilios, was that in Striker Slack? They talked about that being like an old soccer thing in the pile to.
I don't think I saw that.
Randomly grab. Oh yeah. Somebody in Striker talked about it. It's like, oh, that's your average like trashy weekend like soccer player thing. Is to like when a group goes down, just go ahead and grab and send a message. So we do not endorse that. That's all I wanted to say about that.
We don't endorse it, but I'm gonna laugh when it happens.
Absolutely.
In the 31st minute, I think this is probably the closest chance that we got. Well, no, there was a chance I think in like the 7th minute where Pochettino almost scored, but in the 31st minute, Fagundes almost sneaks one in to the left post from outside the box. I think it was a corner, got deflected and fell to him outside the box, and he hit it. And it was a good shot. If the keeper hadn't saved it, it would have slotted right into that corner, but ends up getting saved. And then in the 33rd minute, Unu scores another goal, but ends up getting called offside. And upon the replay, he was like 4 yards offside, so it wasn't even close. But it was still a product of them just like slicing through us and pulling us apart with ease, and then opening that space up behind. So there was some other chances, but not a ton else happened after that. Not anything we're spending a lot of time on anyway. What are some of the like lessons learned or like stories coming out of the back end of this game, Jeremiah?
Yeah, for me, I think. Well, we had this debate on that night on whether Josh Wolff gave up in the second half, and I think that was an interesting story. Like watching it live, I felt like they just kind of quit near halftime. And I don't know if it was just keeping Rodney Redis on. We could talk about players too, but I mean, when they were bringing people in and in the attack, the fact that Redis was on the field the whole time just felt like Josh was saving what he could for Sunday, and I did not love that. I was disappointed in it. And
yeah, and so one thing we didn't mention is they brought Cecilio off at halftime, and he didn't play the whole second half. I know that pissed a lot of people off. I I didn't mind it at all. Did not mind it. I think I understand the sentiment of like thinking this is a losing mentality or just like giving up. But given the circumstances, this team was beat the hell up and already resting players, already had players injured. We lose a player in the 9th minute to an injury. If you look at the players who we had unavailable going into the Columbus game, so the injury list, I mean, it's Ben Sweat, Aaron Schoenfeld, who are guys we already knew. Ulisses Segura is not on there, but guys who like we were expecting to play that were maybe not going to play coming into Columbus. It was Nick Lima, Alexander Ring, Matt Besler, Pereira was, Wolff said that he was fit enough to be on the bench, but not fit enough to start. And so 5 or 6 guys that like should probably be starting that were not available to start. My thinking here is, okay, we look terrible. We're already losing this game 2-0. We're beat up really bad. We're tired from playing this midweek game. I'm fine with pulling off Cecilio and sitting him. I'm fine with leaving Rodney on because I like I said, I get like the waving the white flag, but I also, if you just think about kind of like the sports science part of this, Dave Tinney is it's his job to kind of track these guys' minutes, to track these guys' workloads and figure out how much they're able to do in a week, in a day. And he's telling Josh Wolff these things. And so I think he probably already had a plan to kind of limit some minutes. I imagine he would have brought Cecilio off early anyway. And probably the fact that we were down 2-0 made it the 45th minute instead of the 60th minute. But I think in a different set of circumstances, I would have also been mad at that tactic. But the fact of how bad of health shape that we were in that moment, I was fine with him kind of like throwing in the towel and saying like, okay, let's just not get anybody else hurt because we literally can't afford to have anybody else hurt going into this next game.
Yeah. So do you think, I mean, we've got some of the stats here in front of us, and actually, like if you look at X goals and whatnot, you know, it was pretty even. Possession wasn't too far off. You know, Josh talked about how they played in the second half and played better. Do you feel like it's a case of the stats not telling the story, or do you think we were just overreacted? Like watching that game live, I felt like they were awful and outmatched from start to finish, and the second half was better than the first only in terms of they somehow miraculously didn't get scored upon, but they never really looked threatening, and they never looked any better. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that do the numbers lie on this one, or were we just like overreacting as fans to our impressions about what Josh was doing?
No, the numbers are lying, and it was a terrible game.
Okay, it was a terrible game. I agree with that.
So I looked at the expected goals again. I think Pochettino's chance it was within the first 10 minutes. I think that one alone was almost at a 0.5 xG. And so that accounts for half of that there. And then we got a few other like very low percentage shots later on that kind of added up to that 1.1. But no, I don't think and then possession, it was close to 50-50. A lot of that was in our own defensive half, just kind of passing the ball back and forth. Not a lot of like meaningful or useful possession in the attacking third. So I think this is a case exactly what you said of the numbers lying for sure.
All right. Well, let's talk about a couple players before we move on to the sort of the rest of the week and the better half of these 2 weeks games. And I want to talk about defensive midfielders that we had. You know, one was Aiden Stanley at some point, right? Which we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but
20 or 30 minutes in central midfield.
Yeah, that kind of shows the kind of game we had. But Berhalter, I feel, was a little bit the same. I mean, people seem like really down on him just on Twitter and whatever after the match. But then, again, if you look at the numbers, it seemed like he had a pretty solid performance. So how did you feel about the way he played?
Yeah, I think like eyeball test, he did look a little bit nervous and a little uneasy at times. I think mostly when moving the ball forward, and he like played it safe a lot of the times when in possession. But looking back at his stats, defensively, he had some really good numbers here. So 6 tackles, 6 interceptions, 1 block. And then this is from whoscored.com, but they had his match rating as a 7.55, which is like getting into like in some games like man of the match territory. Like if you get above an 8, you're probably the best player on the field, but which is definitely not the case here. But as far as just like statistics go, he had a pretty good night. I think most of those, like I said, are on the defensive half, but he did some useful stuff offensively as well. I think it's one of the just like his inexperience and Josh Wolff talked about in the press conference afterwards, saying that like when you play a young guy like that, you would prefer to have some experience next to him, and we didn't really get to do that because it was like Diego and Pochettino were in there, but at the end of the game, like we said, it was Aiden Stanley and Berhalter in a double pivot playing next to each other, and that's probably not the ideal scenario to put either of them in midfield. But I think overall, I think he had a pretty good game, some bright spots. But if it were a game that we were like actually going after, which it didn't really seem like we were, I think maybe he would have been exposed a little bit more going forward. But yeah, I did see some people thinking he had a bad game, and I don't really think that was the case.
Yeah, he did the best he could given the situation. Yeah, and Josh did talk about adjusting their tactics, a little bit, knowing that, which they had to do on the fly, right? Because like we talked about, we only knew like 10 minutes before the game that was going to happen, but he talked about keeping Diego back. So Diego Fagundes, again, covering miles and miles of field in this match. And the guy, he looked tireder against Minnesota than I've ever seen him look, but then he bounced right back too, and we'll get into that. But that was really impressive out of him. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Talking about Diego, that was another criticism that I saw some fans giving Wolff, and was like, you cannot play Diego more than, I don't remember what minute he came out, but again, it would be irresponsible to play Diego more than 65, 70 minutes in this game. He was completely dead at the end of the San Jose game. And then, like, because we're so short on midfielders, you're going to have to use them against the Crew. And so it's regardless of whether or not we're trying to win that game, you cannot leave Diego on the field. And so again, I had no problem with him pulling Diego early on that game.
Yeah, let's talk about the guy who played the whole game. That's Rodney Redis, who appears in, what is it, run with no purpose up and down one side of the field for 90 minutes. How did you feel about his performance?
So I saw some people say this and completely agree, but I think maybe it was Chris Wellhausen that said on Twitter, is like, I forgot he was on the field. Like, I did not remember that he was even playing. And I think that's probably sums it up right there. Like, he was pretty invisible for a lot of the game, and then when he did get the ball, didn't really do anything useful with it. I think he got one quote unquote shot off that was like 50 yards over the post, and then put a cross in that kind of did the same thing, like skied it over and wasn't close to anybody. Really disappointing outing from Redes. I really want him to succeed, and especially after how good he looked in preseason, because if you remember back in like preseason stuff, I wasn't very high on Redes, and a lot of other people were, and then he had like a really good preseason and scored some goals and looked really dangerous. And then once the season started, he had that little injury and then was out for a little bit. And that's when Stroud kind of took over that position and made it his own. And since then, when Redes has been on, he hasn't looked very good at all.
Yeah, and Josh talked about the injury too. And I don't know if he was just like trying to provide Rodney some support by pointing that back out, but he did say he basically hasn't gotten back to the same place he was in preseason because of the injury. And then, so I think Mark Turner asked Josh after the game about Pochettino and free kicks. And Josh said if there was anything around the goal, he'd be on the ball, but we just haven't created those opportunities at all.
Yeah. Mark Turner kind of posed the question, like, why haven't we seen Tomas on free kicks? And Josh was essentially like, we're not getting them in the areas where where like it would even be a shot, right? And so like we have other preferences on like free kicks that are going to be crosses instead of shots. But he's like, yeah, absolutely. If we get one that's in shooting distance, that's Tomas's territory, and he's going to take them. And then we got a question on Twitter today from Gabe Kirchner, and he said we seem to have a conspicuous lack of dangerous free kick opportunities outside our opponent's 18-yard box. Why? Are teams avoiding fouling us because of Poch's reputation, or are we not taking defenders on, or both? And I think the main part of it is that we're just not getting the ball into those areas. Like they call it zone 14. So if you get into like really nerdy soccer tactics stuff, like Pep Guardiola level stuff, they actually divide the field into a bunch of little boxes. And what is called zone 14 is the area right above the 18-yard box, like right on the top of the 18-yard box. And it's the most dangerous part of the field that you can get the ball into. And Austin just doesn't really get the ball there. And so that is where you would want Tomas Pochettino taking free kicks. But because we don't really get the ball there in general, we're not going to get fouls in that area either. So we already kind of went over the stats here. Is there any other narratives we want to cover from this game?
No, let's get on to the Columbus week, or the sort of the narratives in between. I think injuries were obviously a part of it. Or what we thought. I guess we thought injuries were going to be a bigger part of it than they were, right? I know 2 days before we looked at the injury list, which I think you have, and I guess go over that. I was very depressed about how bad we were going to get blown out.
Because, yeah, Josh Wolff in the press conference acted like, I mean, we knew Lima, like a hamstring, you're not going to pop back in a few days. He's probably out for a few weeks at best. So he's out, but then he was like, yeah, Ring is questionable, like may not be able to go at all. Besler may not be able to go at all. And so we were thinking we're going to have literally 2 midfielders on the entire team. And like, are we going to have to play Aiden Stanley in central midfield? Are we going to have to play Hector Jimenez in midfield? If we play Hector there, who's playing right back? And it was just a complete mess. And I was very nervous about it.
Yeah, I was too. I think I think there were people suggesting lineups, and then yeah, Chris Bills asked that midfield question. It's remember, if you want to start Hector there, like you gotta find somebody else to fill in. So luckily, it turned out to not be that dramatic. I think the other 2 big things in between were obviously Columbus Austin Twitter beefs, which I probably weren't as big as I thought they might be. I mean, the small group of people that fight all the time managed to find a way to fight all the time, and we should talk about Chris Bills kind of being inserted into the middle of that, or being a part of the middle of that. Do you want to cover that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So he went on. So was that on Top Flight or We Are Austin TV?
It was Top Flight. He was on Top Flight Pod.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was the clip they pulled and put on YouTube out of that whole interview.
Right. Yeah. So Chris Bills went on Top Flight podcast and did like a whole episode. And some Columbus folks went and pulled a video clip of him saying one thing that made a lot of Columbus people angry. And he got a lot of heat on Twitter over this last week. And you were saying that it was less than you thought it was good, than you were expecting. I think it was way more than I was expecting. And that's probably my mistake.
Yeah, I guess it was just overall, outside of that Chris thing, there was not a lot of general drama among the Columbus fans other than that moment.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about the all the heat that Chris was getting. Chris Bills is a professional journalist. He's very good at his job. He takes his job very seriously. If he says something publicly and on the record, it's because he has enough corroborated sources and he's heard it from enough trustworthy sources to believe that it's true. He's not gonna he would be putting his job in jeopardy if he were throwing around rumors willy-nilly. And so I saw like even Austin people like saying like, oh, why is Chris getting caught up in all this stuff? And it's like, if he said it, then he has enough information to believe that it's 100% true. And so I just thought it was worth throwing that in defense of Chris, because he's not just trying to stir the pot or like try to piss off some Columbus people. anything he said on that podcast. He also came on our podcast a while back and talked about the Columbus stuff. And in the course of that, he also will criticize Anthony Precourt. He'll criticize the way the Austin FC folks handled that whole thing. And during the Save the Crew stuff, he asked a lot of questions of Anthony Precourt and company that they did not like. And like Chris Bills was not always on their good list. It's questionable if the main journalist writing about your team is ever going to be on your good list. But,
right.
But Chris Bills pissed off Austin FC people simply for the fact that he was doing his job and asking questions that they didn't always want asked. And so I think for people criticizing Chris for being an Austin homer or anything like that, not the case. He's a true professional.
Yeah, he was, and he did a good job. Like I listened to the whole interview, and he did throughout that. And it's always kind of wild to listen back to some of those things and to be very happy that we don't have to worry about all this political stuff before. And another thing I thought was interesting was the way that coaches sort of address it. So Caleb Porter's like, yeah, this is circled like twice on the calendar, and these fans, like, I know what these fans care about, and we hate Austin, and blah, 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 blah. And Josh, I think he got asked twice about it during the press conference before the game, and just said, we're focused on what we have here and not what we have in the past. Talked about Dallas and Houston being state rivals, and really was trying to take the heat out of that rivalry too. But I think that makes sense, sort of given the perspectives from the cities.
Yeah, given the dynamics, I think Porter would be the one more free to say stuff like that. And so,
I thought who they are, Landon, too, given like their personalities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Porter doesn't. Porter will. You can't make him stop talking, really. So. All right, so we're gonna get, like we said, we're gonna get into the more fun game of the week, but first we're gonna take a quick break. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. One of the things they do with the club that we haven't talked about is they have this campaign called Kick the Keys, which is a designated driver campaign. And so for those of you that are going to Q2 and have the tendency to, like all of us, want to like have a beer or two before or after the match, like, one, use transit or route plan, or two, like find a designated driver. There's lots of other options out there besides driving. So listen to our friends at FVF and pass the keys to somebody else.
Absolutely. You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. All right, let's get into this recap of the Columbus Crew match. So this ended up being another very exciting 0-0 draw, which sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but it's been 2 weeks in a row. Both of the games at Q2 Stadium have finished scoreless, but have both been very exciting games.
Yeah, they've both been super exciting, super emotional. So before we get into the game too much, because I feel like we did not talk about this enough last week. Last week the San Jose match had that amazing like Austin tifo.
Oh yeah,
we covered very briefly, but like I went back and listened. I'm like, we did not exactly give the respect to the 200 people in month that it took or whatever. And Katie Ensign pointed that out to me too, that we didn't do that. But this week there was a really cool pregame thing from the fans too. And I'm wondering, did you post that from the account, like the rainbow
I did.
card? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I posted photos this morning on the Moon Tower accounts. But yeah, and it was a different kind of tifo. It was like the mosaic style where everyone's holding a different card in the right spot, and it spelled out ATX in like a big like rainbow array. Essentially, it was really nice. It looked really great from our seats. We were over like midfield on the upper level, so it looked really great from over there. And then saw a lot of other pictures from other spots in the stadium that looked awesome. Yeah,
that looked really cool. And we we're right next to supporters, and we got word that the top right corner, the red corner, might not be very good. So we ran upstairs and like each held up 2 cards to help fill in that section too. So it's a little bit of like last minute participation, but I appreciated that. But yeah, the pregame stuff again was good. Gina Chavez did a great job with the national anthem. It was Pride Week, so I was really the atmosphere again was amazing, and it made for an exciting 0-0 draw
Yeah.
for 2 weeks in a row.
Again, before we get into the game, mentioning Pride Week, I think this is one of the things that I'm like most proud of this supporter culture is bringing the kind of energy and the kind of atmosphere that supporter section brings, but at the same time being like radically inclusive and radically democratic and bringing everyone in, letting people's voices be heard in that group. I think it's a thing that you might find one or the other of those things in a lot of supporters groups around the country, but very rarely do you get both of those things. And I think it's super cool that Austin has been able to build both of those cultures under the same umbrella. So I thought that TIFO kind of embodied that and was like, I don't know. I just really liked seeing that like insane, crazy supporter section also showing like this big like message of solidarity in that moment as well. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that was.
All right, let's jump into the game. So again, we were talking about the injuries. We were expecting Ring to maybe not play at all, Besler to not play at all. The lineups come out and Ring and Besler are both in the starting lineup. And so we end up getting like not far from a best starting 11 with the players that we were expecting to have anyway. We had Jimenez at right back, Besler and Cascante at center back, Kolmanich left back, and then Ring, Pochettino, and Fagundes in the midfield. Then the front line was Gallagher on the left, Cecilio in the middle, and Stroud on the right. And so whenever that lineup came out, I was like, whoa, this is way better than I was expecting. And so I already had like my expectations were pretty low and was not expecting this game to go very well. But then when that happened, it like gave me a little bit of hope. I was like, okay, I think we can maybe do this now.
I think that was the story of the whole. Yeah, that's the story of the game, right? Every moment, I'm like, oh, it's getting a little bit better and a little bit better, and
yeah,
it almost turned out to be great. But yeah, that was very rewarding. Other than Lima, which we knew what was going to play, that's basically our best 11 at this point. I feel like.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll talk more about what our best 11 maybe is here in a little bit, but 20 seconds into the game, Diego Fagundes almost scores a goal. A ball gets kind of crossed, played into the box. It bounces about waist high. Diego is unmarked in the box and kind of he has to play like it's like waist high, and so he has to like lift his leg up and kind of do like kind of a scissor kick or like volleys it a pretty high ball, ends up pushing it wide. But that would have been amazing if we could have scored 20 seconds into that game. That would have been like, again, as soon as that first goal goes in, Anthony Precourt is going to have to spend another $260 million on a stadium because that one's going to explode and it's not going to exist anymore. But yeah, that would almost happen 20 seconds in. I think early in the game, we were possessing the ball really well, moving the ball really well. Columbus's center backs were marking Cecilio really tight. And so Vormgor was, anytime Cecilio would drop in and kind of playing that false nine role and dropping into the midfield, the center back was following him. And so Cecilio didn't really get on the ball a lot early on. He ended up building into the game, and as their defense got a little more tired, he got on the ball a lot more. But early on, they were doing pretty good at keeping him out of the game. But we were still, like I said, possessing and moving the ball really well. It reminded me of some of those first few games when we were out possessing teams 60-40 pretty often. And then defensively, midfield pressure was really good. The energy was really high, and Columbus had a really hard time passing through us and moving through us very often. So really promising for a lot of that. I think in the 32nd minute, there was a moment where maybe Stroud didn't make the best decision. He was driving in at goal from deep. He had Cecilio in space at the top of the box. And instead of playing that ball in, he takes a couple more touches and shoots. And do you remember that moment, Jeremiah?
I do. And somebody posted, I think I saw on Twitter just before we started recording, like the picture of that from the broadcast. It was over the top of over the field. And like it was from overhead, it was super obvious about what the better decision would have been.
Yeah. And looking at that, I think Stroud was either afraid to make that pass or he was being selfish and wanted to score the first goal. And either way, like, that's not very good. Like, it's it's not great, either of those options. I thought Stroud overall wasn't clinical enough. I think he got released into dangerous spaces pretty often and was rarely able to do much with it. So I didn't think he had a great game. One of the most dangerous moments of the game against us was in the 42nd minute. Harrison Offal puts in a low cross into kind of like right into the 6-yard box. Stuver has to come off the line, but it was kind of an awkward thing. He didn't know if it was going to take a touch or not. And so he blocks it from Zardes, who is running to the back post, but the ball kind of pops up and bounces once in front of goal. And Cascante is able to like kind of work his way around it and clear it. And watching that live, I didn't realize how close to goal it was until Cascante hit it. And I was like, oh, I should have been way more nervous right there. But watching it back on the TV replay, it was, very nervy moment. But Cascante did well there to kind of take his time and not panic, or maybe it could have turned into even an own goal at that point. But he did really well there.
Yeah, and it's, again, the center back pairing. No matter who they are now among the three, seems to be making a lot of good decisions. Like Cascante and Besler are both really good. And Cascante has been like way better than I think a lot of people expected so far. He's played really, really well, and he's been a real highlight. I remember when we signed him, people were talking about like, why would you give this amount of GAM? I think is what it was we paid for him, given who he was. But I mean, he's absolutely lived up to expectations. That seems to be something that scouting, Claudia on the scouting team just seemed to have really nailed.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it was like $250,000 of GAM, which now seems like a deal. Like he's like, it's not a ton of money, and we're not paying him a ton of money, and so I'd pay that much for him now, because on the ball he's been our best center back as far as like progressing the ball forward in useful ways. 100% better than the other two guys. I wish we could kind of combine all three of our center backs into one person, and they would be the perfect center back. But Romagna just like physically is much more capable than the other two. He's faster. His recovery speed is much better. In like one-on-one kind of challenges, he can just muscle guys off the ball. He's still not as capable on the ball, like just with the ball at his feet, and doesn't have the vision that Cascante does playing the ball forward. And so I think Cascante has done a lot better. Like, we got nervous in preseason when Fafa Picol burned him in that preseason game. But he's done a really good job of just like staying in good positions to where he doesn't get burned like that. Like, I can't really remember a time in the last handful of games when Cascante has been just like beaten for pace, and like that was the reason we gave up a goal or anything. So I think he's been really good.
And one thing we didn't talk about was those, like, Romagna had a couple of big lumbering runs in the second half against Minnesota.
Oh yeah,
too, which I think it spoke to how like wide open the end of that game was. But what I was going to say is like, so maybe Claudio knows what he's doing. Maybe I feel like we have these three center backs, and they're kind of in they're a good point in the career to have them, right? So Besler can't play 90 minutes every match, but he's like a good leader. Could be a team captain. So you hope that like
makes really big plays still as well.
Yeah, makes big plays. So you hope like as Besler transitions out and can play less, like Romagna will get familiarity with the league and learn from the other guys and like fill back in, and we'll be really solid at center back in a way that I don't think that we all expected to be going into the year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hopefully that is the case, and he can learn a lot from those other two guys as the season goes on. In the stoppage time in the first half, there was kind of a goal psych out. Pochettino hit one from outside the box, and it was just wide, but it like bounced off the what do you call the board, like the ad boards behind the goal, and rolled across the back of the net in a way that looked like it had gone in
the net. Yeah.
And so at first I was like, no, he missed. And then like half the stadium started cheering, and I was like, oh, maybe he did score. And they're like, no, he didn't score. But maybe we shouldn't talk about this on air, but I heard a rumor that somebody that we know thought that was a goal and like threw his beer in the air, and then got asked to leave the supporter section because someone got mad.
May have been the first Austin FC fan to be asked to leave. Not counting the guy that ran on the field in the women's match, but the first Boston FC fan to ask to leave. And you know what? That is a guy that will wear that as a badge of honor. So I feel like that's okay.
You won't mind us saying on the show. I'm still not going to say his name, but
for sure. But yeah, I did too. I was like, I think I was fooled by it because I was like, why are people not more excited around me? We just scored. And then I figured out it was just like the angle and the sort of the optics of it that looked wild.
And then, halftime, then Columbus ended up making 2 changes at halftime. They brought in Marlon Hairston and Waylon Francis. Milton Valenzuela was their left back, and he's really dangerous getting forward, but we were finding Stroud in behind him with great frequency. And then I think Valenzuela is also just coming back from injury. I think this may have been his first start either all season or since the very beginning of the season. And so they're probably going to limit his minutes anyway, but they end up pulling him out to try to limit Stroud on that side. Just after that, Stuver has a really big save. Zelarayan gets the ball close to the top of the box and takes a shot. And the shot on its own, it wasn't at an angle or in a location that I don't think it would have been super dangerous, but it ends up deflecting off of Besler and making it a really awkward save for Stuver. But Stuver is able to adjust and get to it, just like he always has and seemingly always will, but comes up really big again in kind of a pretty difficult save there. On the 60th minute, Kakuta Mane ends up coming in for Stroud. Like I said, Stroud didn't have a fantastic game. And then also, I know Chris Wellhausen has been a person who's wanted to see Mane come on earlier in games. There's been a lot of games we're kind of holding on for our life and needed to defend really hard. I think in those situations, Mane is not the right choice. In this game, we were controlling the game enough and in keeping possession well enough that I think Mane was a good shout here. We kind of needed some of that flair just to create something in the attacking third. I thought Mane was a good call there. He didn't necessarily create a ton of stuff. He opened up some chances just with pace and kind of getting out on a counterattack a couple of times, and played a few balls kind of to the back post to try to get headed back across that looked pretty good, but overall didn't end up doing anything super effective. Then we got to see Danny Pereira come on in the 73rd minute. It was really great to see Danny back in the mix. I think it's been 4 or 5 games now that he hasn't played at all. And he actually looked pretty good when he came on as well. So when he came on for Gallagher, and Fagundes ended up playing on the wing for a bit, which is the first time we've seen that. Then there's a couple more saves from Stuver. One big chance from Austin in the 84th minute. Fagundes played Cecilio into the box, and his first touch set up really well, and then he ended up slicing it over the top of the goal. And I feel like Austin's chances were a lot like that. I was looking at the expected goals tally that MLS has on their stats page, and there are not many high percentage shots. We took a lot of shots. I think we ended up with 17 shots, 5 on target, but none of the shots had a very high XG score. And so I felt I was looking at kind of my highlights for the game is I don't have many Austin shots written here, but it's because there weren't a ton of really great high percentage shots that we took really. Towards the end of the game kind of opened up and turned into a little bit of a track meet where they would run at us and then we would run at them and they would run at us and we'd run at them. In the 91st minute, there was a penalty shout where Nagby was kind of dribbling around the top of the box and gets around several defenders and was running along the left side of the box. Ring comes and steps through him, and maybe he got the ball. The TV angle didn't show it well enough, and where I was sitting in the stadium couldn't tell well enough. Did you get to watch that replay again, Jeremiah?
I didn't watch the replay of that play. I didn't think among the potential red cards we discussed tonight, it was not as much of a possible one as the Cecilio in Minnesota one. It's just I didn't feel like it was that.
It
warranted.
Wasn't not a red. I don't think it would have been a card. I think it maybe should have been a penalty. Yeah. I think probably penalty, the clear and obvious rule. So like the ref didn't give a penalty on the field, and so VAR isn't going to overturn it unless it's a clear and obvious error. I think it was gray in the like gray space enough that it wasn't clear and obvious, and I think that's probably what saved us from a penalty, because on the replay, like maybe Ring gets a toe to the ball, but he mostly just takes Nagbe out there, and I think it very easily could have been a penalty.
And did they go to VAR on that at all, or no?
So they kind of paused, so I think VAR did look at it.
Okay.
They like kind of held the game up for a second. Based on what the announcers were saying on the TV broadcast, it seemed like they did hold up and look at it for a second, but didn't look very long. So apparently they were happy with what they saw and went on. After that, I think Besler had one more big block on a Zardes shot, and then the whistle was blown shortly after that. But yeah, like we said before, an extremely exciting 0-0 draw. Austin ended up with 57% possession, which I think this is the first time in 5 or 6 games that we've really bossed possession like that.
Right.
Expected goals was pretty even, like around 1 apiece. Austin had 17 shots, 5 on target, and then Columbus had 15 shots with 6 on target. So lots of opportunities for both teams. Kind of looking at performances, I thought the entire back line for Austin was really, really good. And I think you could argue any of Austin's... I think in the stadium, they gave Alex Ring man of the match.
They did, and I only know that because I saw him like with the big, like beating the big drum or what. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised that it was him. I mean, not that it was like he had a bad match, but I can see people taking that spot.
I thought it was pretty good, yeah. And I think in most Austin FC games, it's like either Alex Ring or Brad Stuver deserves it. In this game, I think you could have given it to Stuver. I think you could have given it to Jimenez. I think you could have given it to Matt Besler. Matt Besler had some really important blocks and some really important, just like those snap moments where he just puts his foot in the right place at the exact right time to block a chance. Jimenez, I think he ended, I can't remember his defensive numbers were really good. Something like 4 or 5 interceptions and 4 or 5 clearances. And then playing the ball forward, he was really useful in possession and kind of creating those triangles on the sideline there to kind of keep the ball moving. Is it blasphemous to think that Lima might be a more effective right back? That Jimenez might be a more effective right back than Nick Lima?
So, I mean, I haven't seen enough of him to have that opinion. Do you feel like he offers more, like, is he more of a two-way player? Or
I think Jimenez is much more effective going forward for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, because I know we talked about Lima going forward. I think last week you said he finally took a shot that you were happy with him taking because you never wanted him to shoot again. But yeah, so you feel like he's more of a threat going forward and back than Lima.
Yeah, and I think before this game I would have said like that Lima was definitely a much better defender than Jimenez is, and Jimenez was excellent defensively in this game. He was very, very good. I think he's a more slight player than Lima. Like Lima's a much more physical player. And so maybe in like certain situations against certain players, Lima would be a better defender. But in this game, Jimenez was really, really good. Like I remember a moment where Wormgore, like one of Columbus's biggest players, was in the box going after a corner, and Jimenez kind of like muscled him out of the spot and won the header. And he's not a big guy, and so doing stuff like that, as well as like pushing up the right side and like dribbling guys, and just all around had a really excellent game. And yeah, like I said, the whole back line was really solid.
You want to let's talk about goals, or the lack of goals, and why that is. I think it's probably a topic that deserves some time. You know, Josh talked about, again this week, like he did on last week's show, players pushing too hard for a goal. On the other hand, we see a lot of talk on social and on Slack about players being too passive in the attack. So are we not taking chances? Are we taking the wrong chances? Like what's the answer for why we don't score more?
Yeah, I think last night, like, epitomized like all of our problems, like very clear examples of like all of our problems. And partially, I think it's a lack of quality in the final third. I think Stroud and Gallagher, as many strengths as they both do have, I think they both lack kind of the either the skill or decision making, or probably a combination of both of those things, to be consistently dangerous in a game like that. They were both got in lots of space in really dangerous moments several times, and we never scored a goal. And so Kevin Morris asked a question on Twitter as well along these same lines. And he said, I really want to know what you think about trailing runs from midfielders into the box. It feels as if a big part of why final balls aren't connecting is that movement inside and into the box is not good enough. A good striker solves half of that. So we did a really great job of getting wide players, getting the ball to players out wide. But then there, like half the time, it seems like there would be a very predictable and hopeful ball into an empty box. They're just like, okay, there's two guys in there. I'm just going to hit it real hard into the box and hope somebody connects with it. And so I think there's a lot of times when that happened. And then in the moments when we did kind of crash the box and we did have numbers in there, they weren't making good decisions. We talked about that Jared Stroud moment earlier where he probably could, like, if he could have played a brave, it would have been a brave pass, but it was on. Like it was a pass that was there to be made, and he chose not to do it and chose to shoot. And so I think it's, like I said before, he was either afraid to make the pass or he was being selfish and was taking a shot. And I think there's, like, in the moments when we do crash the box, we're making bad decisions and not executing. But a lot of times there's not anybody in the box and we're just kind of putting a hopeful ball in there and just like hoping it bounces off someone and goes in.
Yeah, that's what I see. That's what I see a lot of. It's just like a lot of. There's not, well, Kevin's questions talk about runs. There's just doesn't seem like there's a lot of trailing runs. There's a lot of trailing, like jogging around or like one on the outside, but there's not like, it's just like the attack is not aggressive at all. And I don't
you want to see,
why
like,
it's that way.
The combination of a decisive run and an intentional pass connecting to that run. And we don't see that. We don't see Austin doing that very often. And I think Kevin's right. I think it's partly the runs. Like, we're not getting good runs from people. And like he said, a good striker solves that. A good striker makes good runs and puts them there. But I think that still asks the question, are the guys in wide spaces good enough to put a ball on his head or on his foot when he makes that run? And I think bringing a striker, you get to move Cecilio out wide, and maybe he has a bit more quality to be able to do that kind of thing. But yeah, I think a striker solves some of our problems, but doesn't necessarily solve all of them.
I think it's fair. So let's go on to Rick's question. Rick Bendis asks us, are we going to score ever? I would never thought I would say this, but we need Danny Houston back.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with the last part of the question there, Rick, but to answer the first part, are we going to score? Yes, I believe that one day Austin FC is going to score. We're doing everything but scoring, right? Like I would say that game last night against Columbus was, we executed so many parts of the game really, really well. And it's just that final third, that like decision making and quality in the final third was not there. So I think just getting lucky, like we're if we keep creating that many chances and getting that many shots, we're bound to score eventually. But also, we've got some reinforcements coming, hopefully pretty soon. And so maybe it takes new players to make these goals start going in. But yes, Rick, I do believe we are going to score one day. And luckily we have the transfer window coming up soon.
Yeah, so let's talk about the transfer window coming up soon. So we'll officially open on the 7th, I believe, but it doesn't mean that like deals can't happen before.
Right. Yeah. I like, for a while I felt like the 7th was a long way away, but at this point we have 2 games between now and then. We've got Portland, and then is it LAFC? Is that the one after that?
Yeah, that was on the 7th.
On the 7th.
Yeah.
And then we have a kind of a break there. And so after that LAFC game, that's when these reinforcements are going to be coming. And so it's very near. If we can keep guys healthy enough and play like we did against Columbus and just like hold on for these next couple of games, we're going to, at the very least, have more players on the roster just to have enough numbers to like play a healthy team each week.
Yeah, and hopefully the players we have will get a little bit healthier too. You know, I mean, you might, after that one, you expect to get Lima back. You might get, I feel like Schoenfeld's closest, right? Because he's been training a little bit, and then we add some players. We should be in a lot better shape. So let's, what do you want to talk about? So yeah, Chris asked, Bills asked Josh Wolff about urgency on the post game, and Josh said nothing that was particularly new, other than the fact that like we definitely certainly a striker is what we need. And, he also talked about being thin in the midfield, and then also talked about not making a knee-jerk reaction to like what's going on right now with the injuries. But I feel like those two things, there's no knee-jerk to that. Like those are known issues that have to be addressed, that everybody knows that they need to do.
Yeah, I think the knee-jerk comment was regarding the midfield, because we do have several midfielders who are just injured right now. And not several, but a few who are just injured right now. And so it would maybe be a little bit foolish to go out and sign a central midfielder at this point, because when, like, say, Ulises Segura comes back and Danny Pereira is fully fit, like, okay, now we have too many guys in this position. But yeah, signing a striker, he was like, there was a quote where Josh Wolff said, "We need a striker."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we need a striker. We could use some more quality in the attack. And so they've talked about, they haven't gotten specific. The only specific spot they've said is a striker. But I think they've also mentioned like from the midfield and forward. So like attacking players. And I imagine partially they don't want to give away like who all they're scouting and like show their hand too much, but also they may just not know what position they're going to look at. They probably have some flexibility, just who's available, what deal they can get across the line, and then they'll make it work from there, because the players we have now have shown to be pretty positionally flexible and can kind of move around. And so if we get a guy that's good enough to come in that maybe isn't playing the exact spot we need, but is close enough to where you can kind of move some things around, it still probably improves the team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, as much as I love what Stroud and Gallagher have brought to the team so far, we don't need both of them starting and playing almost every minute. Like, you'd almost rather see them splitting a spot, or them being two players out of a 3-player rotation, in a spot in the attack to really make the most of it. Yeah,
absolutely. So Sean Rubio was on the Verde and Black podcast with Adrian Healy this week. What were your takeaways from that interview?
Yeah, there are a couple big things.
And let's tell listeners who Sean Rubio is in case they hadn't heard that.
Exactly. Sorry. Sean Rubio, he is the director of player personnel for Austin FC, which basically means he's in charge of budgets and player acquisition. And obviously, Claudio's a big part of, and the scouting department is a big part of like finding the personnel, but Sean's the guy that like makes sure all the numbers work, and the guy that understands how the MLS salary cap works in a way that nobody else does. And I think he talked about having a background like fantasy baseball and like all these kind of really deep, like nerdy analytical things. But yeah, Sean,
it makes a lot of sense, right?
yeah, for sure. He did. So yeah, he was on. I mean, I think a couple things that we probably, he said the biggest things that fans don't really understand or appreciate is the complication of making any deal happen, particularly in MLS. So it's not like you can just be, we want to go get player A and we just go do it, right? Because you've got the league, you've got the cap, you've got the team player A plays for, you've got the agent of player A, and just all the things that can come together. And I think what he said is the only deals he's surprised by are the ones that actually happen. That, like, Adrian asked about, like, tell me about a dramatic deal that fell apart, and he's like, actually, I'm just amazed anytime anyone actually goes through, which I think is instructive to that. And then
which I think is good for some fans to hear, right? Like, I think they think like, okay, we want this guy, just go pay the money and get him. Or like, we heard this rumor, and so like, it's definitely happening, or, oh, it didn't happen, so that was a complete lie. It's like, no, maybe that one was trying to happen, but the truth is, if they're going to sign 2 or 3 guys, they probably have like they have like 8 or 10 balls in the air right now that they're juggling and trying to make happen, and only 2 or 3 of them are the ones they're actually going to close.
Yeah, which we're gonna break this rule, but I know one thing that you hate doing is talking about predicting exact scores. And one thing I hate doing is like when people's like, we need a striker, let's go throw out like 7 names of the striker that's gonna fill the spot, and it's like, because like we don't really know their situation, we don't know what their targets are. Like, to me, that like speculating on players, at least until there's been some kind of rumor or whatever, is like just a wasted effort.
Especially in soccer, like if you're an NBA team, there's only 20 some odd other NBA teams that you can go and scout from, and then like a handful of guys abroad that you might bring in each year. But in soccer, you're pulling from a worldwide market from dozens of leagues that you could pull from. And so yeah, to predict like these are the 5 guys that Austin FC should go after, and like when really honestly there's dozens of people who are going to fit the profile in the price range that they're going for. And so I agree. Who should we expect to have? It's like, expect the unexpected. You're probably not going to ever have heard of the guy.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. So I don't love that part. And the other thing that he mentioned was just because we don't have a fully formed academy, it makes things complicated, because you can't, like in the stretch we have right now with so many injuries. If we had a full academy, we could bring some like kids in for depth that might.
You pull a 17-year-old to sit on the bench and just like be a warm body, but we literally have no 17-year-olds. Our oldest players are 15 right now.
Yeah, so that part was really that part was really tough, and it was, I think, something that we don't always think. We still don't talk a lot about how much that affects the depth. So there's probably the 2 points that I really appreciated out of that interview that were relevant to it. But I mean, it was good. Like he's personal. He's an interesting guy, and I would encourage folks to listen to it. But I think that those were probably the things that were most relevant to Austin FC's situation right now.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of the rumors that we have heard?
Yeah. Now that we said don't worry about individual players, let's talk about a couple individual players. And I think at least one of these has been in the rumor mill for a while, and that's Vincent Janssen.
Yeah, so 27-year-old striker from Monterrey. He is he Dutch? Where is he from? Dutch or Belgian?
No, I think he's Dutch, because I thought that I think I wrote this note in about whether we could trust another Dutch striker, because I feel like it's like I don't need the second Danny Houston to grace my roster.
Yeah, you're right. He's Dutch. So maybe we shouldn't trust him. But yeah, he's at Monterrey. He's not getting a ton of playing time. He played at Spurs, right?
Yeah, he played at Spurs at one point. So I mean, he's got the pedigree. He's 27, which is a pretty good age. I think. I don't remember what we were doing. We were speculating a little bit, and you said like look for strikers in Monterrey, both from like Monterrey and Tigres, who might not get enough time. That seems like a logical fit.
We were linked with Akeloba from Monterrey as well. So Funes Mori is kind of like their guy there, like their preferred number 9. And Akeloba has since been linked to Nashville. And then there's some loose rumors about Vincent Janssen connected to Austin again. So we don't know how real any of this is, but I think he would be a pretty good profile. I'd be happy with him. I think he would be a very good striker in this league. Another rumor that came through, which this was from MLS News, which I think is an Instagram account that is anonymous and like shared no sources or like how they know this, but also has a ton of followers and seems to have a decent track record. But they were not just saying like this might happen. They said Austin SC has signed this player. They're talking about like it was a done deal. His name is Sebastian Driussi. He is Argentinian, came from it was the River Plate Academy, is that right?
Yeah, and played for River Plate and was really successful in 2016, which is how he ended up going to Zenit St. Pete.
Yeah, so he's still currently at Zenit St. Petersburg. I think recently hasn't like hasn't put up big numbers, but has had some really big seasons for Zenit. His main position is left wing, and that's a position we don't really need more players at right now. But it seems like he's pretty positionally flexible, can play in the middle, can play striker. And so just from what little highlights I've seen of him, I don't know that the profile completely fits what we need, but he does seem to have a really good skill set and one that Austin could use at this moment. If this is the answer for a number 9, he doesn't seem to be like the killer striker that we need, like just that deadly goal scorer. But if it's going to be like this guy plus like a young money striker, I wouldn't be too upset about this. Still, maybe like his strongest position being the same as our most expensive DP right now gives me a little bit of concern. But he looks skillful enough to maybe we can make it work, and it would be fine. But Arch Bell tweeted today that he had been in contact with Driussi's agent, and his agent said that they have not received an offer from Austin FC. So who knows if he's telling the truth or trying to hide something, but he did go on the record with Arch Bell saying that Austin FC has not put an offer for him. So maybe this is BS.
So could we have both these guys? Like, would if we had a Jansen and Driussi, would that be your? And then do you feel better about the attack if that's what we end up with doing? I mean, I think you have to buy down Pochettino, right? Because you'd have to. These guys would both be DPs.
Correct. Yeah, Pochettino would need to be bought down with TAM and become a TAM player. That would open up a second DP spot, and then we could technically sign both of these guys. That would be very ambitious from Austin FC. I know there's a lot made of Austin being on the lower end of the spending spectrum right now. A lot of that has to do with just, we don't have that many players, and so when you add up all the salaries, it's not going to be very much. But also with one DP spot, if we added one reasonably priced DP, we'd be in the top half of the league in spending. If we added these two guys, I haven't done the numbers, but I would guess it would very easily be top third, if not like top 5 or 6 teams in spending in the league, because I think the rumor with Driussi was 5 million would be the transfer fee, which is high for MLS. Not many teams have paid that much for very many players. And then Janssen, I don't know what the number would be there, but I'd imagine it would be similar in a pretty high number as well. So that would be very ambitious. I would be surprised if we got 2 guys of this level, but yeah, I'd be very happy if that happened.
Well, so what else? I think that pretty much covers the news for this week, right? You want to talk a little bit about Portland?
Yeah, let's do a quick little Portland preview for our new MLS fans. Tell them a little bit about Portland.
Yeah, I think the big thing is Portland in many ways, right? And I don't know how many times you've been to Portland, but every place sells like a Keep Portland Weird shirt. And so I think that Portland is very much a sister city to Austin. And I think that the Timbers franchise is a role model to Austin in many ways. You know, the supporters, Timbers Army is a big part of that. I think like Precourts talk about the owner, Merritt Paulson, being like a mentor of his and sort of role model of his.
Yeah, I think he like got connected with him when he was buying into MLS and like kind of struck up a friendship and he was the guy he went to for advice essentially.
Yeah, so they make the playoffs basically every year. They won the MLS Cup in 2015. They were knocked out in the first round of the playoffs last season. I went back and looked at the preseason projections from MLSsoccer.com, and basically everybody picked them to finish top 4. They're a deep veteran team with a lot of big names. So Valeri, Blanco, Chara, or Charas, both of them.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of big names. And I guess the big question is like whether those big names are past it a little bit, because it's also an older franchise too, right? Because a lot of those guys are in their mid-30s now.
Yeah, so and Blanco and Chara, Diego Chara have been injured for a lot of the season. I think Blanco is just coming back, and Chara started the season and missed a few games with injury. But they're 7th in the West right now, and so they've actually been performing pretty well without them. And so with those guys back, they could kind of go on a run here. But guys like Eric Williamson has stepped in and been carrying a lot of weight for that team. And so to have Eric Williamson instead of being your best player, if Eric Williamson is now the fourth best player on the team, that's a good team because Eric Williamson has been great this year. So, it's still a good chance of being a really good team by the end of this season if they can get healthy and kind of keep their level up.
Yeah, and they're one of those teams I think that typically a little bit like Seattle, although that's not the case this year. They know when to be good.
Yeah,
right?
They're just always able to be good, even if they're not good all year. They just have that pedigree, right? Like they just know how to do it.
Yeah, they just find a way to make the playoffs, and they're dangerous in the playoffs. They've only won the MLS Cup once, which is in 2015, which I was a little surprised by. I just thought naturally they would have done that more than one time. But yeah, they'll be dangerous. What do you know about their style of play?
Honestly, I haven't watched them a ton this year. I know in years past they've kind of like what Seattle is doing this year. Like they like to kind of get out on the break and beat teams that way. But honestly, I haven't watched them enough this year to know exactly what their style is. But it is a team that historically and just like personnel wise is going to be like, we're going to need to be careful pushing up high on them because they can break on you. And like Jimmy Chara is very fast and can get up there. And then guys as deadly as Valerian Blanco, if you give them one chance, they're going to take it and they're going to finish it and bury you. Like, you can't give them too many chances because they will end it right there.
Yeah, they're just like sort of the epitome of like quality professional MLS side that are going to do all the things right and just punish you for mistakes. It seems to be the way that they have played and will continue to play.
All right. Anything else about Portland before we wrap up?
No, I hope we see a goal. I'd really love to see the first goal at Q2 at some point. I mean, from us, actually, yeah. I was going to say I would take the first goal from either side, but I would really like to see the first goal. I'd like to see the first goal from us, and after that, it'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you meet someone who's into soccer, meet someone at the game, meet the people who have the season tickets next to you, tell them about the show. It'll help us out a lot, and we'd really appreciate it. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at LViajero87. Jeremiah is at jbentley_ATX. And then you can find the Moon Tower accounts at Moon Tower Soccer, both on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, come find us. We love having those conversations. We'd also encourage you to visit the Striker Texas website. Jeremiah, do you have an article folks should seek out?
Well, I do, but I want to go back to like finding somebody and reviewing the podcast. This has been like super fun. So I met Jose from Oka Army New Braunfels.
Oh yeah,
just like in the beer line on Saturday, and he like just gave me an Oak Army scarf, which is really cool. He was like, "I love the podcast." It's like, "I need a scarf," and he just like gave it to me. And it's like that's a really fun thing to be able to like connect and do that. And so those guys are great, and you know they're making a big effort to like come up. I think they at Fourth Tap too, or they were at Fourth Tap. They weren't in Oscar Blues. They went to Fourth Tap in pregame. But yeah, it's a good group of guys, and it's always fun to just like, if you see us, like talk to us. Like we love talking soccer to anybody and everybody. So that's been good. But I think the article that I would recommend this week is one from Chris on the 28th, which is today or yesterday, depending upon yesterday now when you listen to this, sort of on the lack of goals and what Austin can do to break the seal at Q2.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we will cover the latest Austin FC news and then review that Portland match. And then we'll also preview the upcoming LAFC match, also in Austin. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.